Hi friends, welcome to Vaibhava English Academy. Today, let us look at the poem The Country Without a Post Office, written by Agha Shahid Ali. Edward Said noted that this is poetry whose appeal is universal. Unquote. Agha Shahid Ali was born in 1949 and he died in 2001. Ali is a renowned expatriate poet, translator, and critic of international recognition. He was born and raised in Kashmir. Agha Shahid Ali is an English poet living in America. He received Guggenheim and Ingram Merrill Fellowship. Coming to his works, A Walk Through the Yellow Pages, Rooms Are Never Finished, The Veiled Suit contains selected works across the poet's career, blending multiple ethnic influences into traditional forms and elegant free verses was his forte, and we can see this in all of his poems. His poems reflect Hindu, Muslim, and Western heritage. His memories in Kashmir. When we speak about Agha Shahid Ali, it is very important to understand his past and his connection with Kashmir. Ali's poems display his experience in America and his childhood memories in Kashmir. His poems identify with insecurity, obsession with memory, death, and history. His longing for Kashmir when he was in America is prominently seen in his poems. A large number of Ali's poetic works revolve around Kashmir and Kashmiris. Pitiable state of Kashmir, crippled by continuous violence, is his main theme. He tries to create an imaginary homeland created by a poet who is in exile. Now, coming to this work, The Country Without a Post Office was initially titled Kashmir Without a Post Office. Kashmir Without a Post Office was published in the collection The Country Without a Post Office in 1997. The 1990s uprising in Kashmir, which led to political violence and closed all the post offices for 7 months. Now, this incident triggered uh, Ali to write this poem. In this particular poem, we can find association and repetitive narrative manner. There are recurring phrases and images. This poem is dedicated to his friend James Merrill. Coming to before going into depth into the poem, let us understand what is 1919 incident. After Pakistan sent troops into the region to annex the states, the ruler of Kashmir, Maharaja Hari Singh, signed the Instrument of Accession on October 26, 1947, making Kashmir a part of India. This did not stop the bloodshed or fighting, however, as various Muslim and Kashmiri independence groups continued to battle Indian forces for control of this region. Pakistan tried to annex Kashmir in 1965 and 1971 but failed. And in 1990, a new outbreak erupted between Pakistan and India over Pakistani support of Muslim militants in Kashmir. More than 100,000 Hindus fled Kashmir Valley, fearing for their lives, and India moved more troops into the region to stop cross-border infiltration from Pakistan. Insurgents assassinated Hindu officials, and in return, the Indian military routinely harassed and often shot peaceful unarmed demonstrators. So, this was the history of Kashmir in 1990s, and because of this violence, what happened? Post office were shut down for nearly 7 months, and it was a time when people didn't have mobile phones, didn't have internet, so only form of communication was in the form of post. If the post office was closed for some time, that means the region became isolated. Some post offices were converted into bunkers by the army. In the poem, Shahid writes about the land of doomed addresses, referring to letters and packages that piled up in post office and went undelivered. He further goes on talk more about haunting experiences during the conflict. He writes about longing and struggle to understand what is happening in his home and his heart. Ali also compares the misfortunes of exiled Hindus and oppressed Muslims. Ali's friend and the letter. So, before reading a poem, if we are understanding the background, historical background of how this work of art came into being, it would be very good. Now, this poem was triggered into Ali's mind by a letter sent by his friend. The poem was inspired by a letter Ali received from a childhood friend, Irfan Hassan. The letter described an incident in Nagar, Srinagar, where Irfan Hassan saw heaps of letters in a post office, and he found many letters addressed to himself and Ali's father, sent by Ali. Irfan sent a letter through family to Ali telling him about this. The prologue of the book was dedicated to Irfan Hassan. The poem is divided into four sections. Each section is composed of 8 line stanzas A, B, C, D, D, C, B, A. See, if you look at the rhyme scheme, A, B, C, D, and then coming back, D, C, B, A. This symmetrical rhyme scheme narrates the movement of the speaker. He goes up and down the minaret and in and out of darkness. Each line in the poem consists of around 10 syllables, providing more restrictions on the poet. These restrictions help in creating a tight linguistic environment that equals the suffocating emotional state of the speaker. The poet tries hard to understand himself and the reason for war. The poem is written in 4 sections, each composed of 3 octaves. The first section describes the narrator returning to Kashmir, where images of minarets, astrologers, and postal inspectors are evoked. The next stanza refers to the violence in the region. The second section introduces people trying but unable to talk to each other. No nation is mentioned on the postal stamps because the region is disputed. The third section has the narrator take on the role of the muezzin, but instead of calling people to prayer, he calls them to buy postage stamps before he is dead. In the fourth and final section, the narrator reads letters that have been piling up. Slowly, the narrator descends into madness, ending with a personal thought that he would like to live forever. Now, let us look at the poem, the very first section. Again, I have returned to this country where a minaret has been entombed. Someone soaks the wicks of clay lamps in mustard oil. Each night climbs its steps to read messages scratched on planets. His fingerprints cancel bank stamps in that archive for letters with doomed addresses, each house buried or empty. Here, the poet speaks about Kashmir, where post offices are not working for the past 7 months. The very first line. Again, I have returned to this country. This country refers to Kashmir, where a minaret has been entombed. Where a minaret is a structure, is a tall structure, a tall building. It can be reached with so many staircases, and that is entombed. Someone soaks in the wicks of clay lamps in mustard oil. Each night climbs its steps to read messages inscribed on planets. Here, the person refers to the muezzin who usually calls people to prayer. But then here, the muezzin, what he does is he soaks wicks of clay lamps because he is using the night time so that he would have to see the light. Therefore, he is having clay lamps and he soaks the wicks in mustard oil and using that uh, lamp as a companion, he climbs the minarets during night. His fingerprints cancel bank stamps in that archive of letters with doomed addresses. So, what he does is he cancels the bank stamps with addresses with doomed addresses. That means such uh, places do not exist or such houses have been destroyed or bombed. So, he is canceling the houses, the addresses which do not exist, each house buried or empty. So he's cancelling the posts which are addressed to the places which are entombed. Moving on. Empty because so many fled, ran away, and became refugees there in the plains, where they must now, with a final dewfall, to turn the mountains to glass. They'll see us through them, see us frantically bury houses to save them from fire that, like a wall, caves in. The soldiers light it, horn the flames, burn our world to sudden papier machine. So in the previous section, the poet was speaking that the museum cancels the stamps of addresses which are empty. Now here he is asking empty, why is that empty? Because many people have fled or ran away from there and they have become refugees in the plains. Here the reference can be of many Hindu Pandits who escaped from Kashmir and they became refugees in the plains. And what they do there, where they must now, with a final dewfall, to turn the mountains to glass. So what they do is, once they have become the refugees over there, they are remembering their place. They are trying to uh, have a glance of their past. And what happens? They see us through them, see us frantically bury houses to save them from fire that like a wall caves in. Here we can find, he is using the fire as a metaphor to war. So those refugees who are safe in the plains, they see the others who are suffering here, the Kashmiris who are suffering here, who are left alone, who are left behind. They are suffering, and the refugees they are witnessing the suffering. So, what are the people who are left in Kashmir doing? They are frantically burying their houses to save. That is, they are their houses get destroyed, their lives get destroyed, and the terror or the war is like a fire that is trying to cave into their lives. The soldiers light it, horn the flames, and burn our world to sudden papier mâché. Papier mâché is a machine that converts into paper. So just like that, the soldiers light their homes, and the flames eat the fire, eat the entire buildings. And what happens? Just the residue is left. Come to the next stanza. Inlaid with gold, then ash. When the museum died, the city was robbed of every call. The houses were swept about like leaves for burning. Now every night we bury our houses, theirs, the ones left empty. We are faithful. On their door we hang wreaths. More faithful, each night fire again is a wall, and we look for the dark as it caves in. So here the poet describes the burning process. When the buildings are burning, what happens? First it looks everything is in gold, and later on what remains? Only ash remains. And then he is describing an incident. When the museum died, the city was robbed of every call. Muezzin is the person who calls the faithful to prayer. When the Muezzin died, Muezzin was killed. What happened? The city was robbed of the call. Nobody is there to call the faithful to prayer. The houses were swept about like leaves for burning. Once the people fled from there, once the war started, the people the civilians could not stay over there. And what happened? They left. Once they left, what happened? Their houses were burnt and they were swept just like leaves. And what happens every night? We bury our houses, theirs, the one left empty. So the remaining people, they try to safeguard whatever is left. But what happens? The fire caves in and they look for darkness. They look for a place of safety. Here, fire refers to war and they look for a place of safety every night. And the poet says that we are the faithful. On their doors, we hang the wreaths. More faithful, each night fire is again a wall. Okay, so he says that the remaining people are very faithful and they are immersed in sorrow. The ones who left, they are reflecting over their past, whereas the people struck in Kashmir are suffering the agony. So let us just look at the summary of the first section. The epigraph of Ali's poem is from one of the great poets, Gerald Manley Hopkins's terrible sonnets, which begins, I wake and feel the fell of dark, not day. So that is the epigraph. Epigraph is a poem which has connection to the content of this particular poem, and this epigraph is written in the very first page of the collection of poems. Ali's poems echo many of the themes and images in Hopkins's. In the first section, The Country Without a Post Office, the narrator returns to a country where a minaret has been entombed. The minaret is a tower used in Islamic architecture from which a muezzin calls the faithful to prayer. Minarets are usually located at the corners of the mosques. The person climbing the stairs and reading messages on planets also evokes the image of an astrologer. When he begins cancelling stamps, he evokes the image of a postal inspector. The poet speaks about people who fled from their own houses and became refugees. The poet says that the remaining people are faithful and they hang wreaths on the houses of those who fled. The poet also speaks about bombing of houses, of how the leftover people are counting their days. When the houses are on fire, it glows like gold and later on become ashes. Now let us proceed to the second section of the poem. We are inside the fire looking for the dark. One card lying on the street says, I want to be he who pours blood. To soak your hand, or I will leave mine in the cold till the rain is ink and my fingers at the edge of pain are seals all night to cancel the stamps. The mad guide, the lost speak like this. They haunt a country when it is ash, phantom heart. Okay, here again the poet is referring to the fire and how fire is just the war or the terror outside, and how they crave to be in the dark, how they crave for safety. And on the road there is a card line, and in that it is written, I want to be he who pours blood. To soak your hands, or I will leave mine in the cold till the rain is ink and my fingers at the edge of pain are seals all night to cancel the stamps. Here, the card on the street says that uh, he wants to turn his blood into ink so that he could write. He could write on the postal uh, on the post, and then he wants to seal the post so that it could be delivered to the beloved. That mad guide. The poet is telling that the person might be mad. The lost speak like this. The people who have left, the people who have fled, the people whose homes are destroyed speak like this. They haunt a country when it is ash. Phantom heart. He's calling his own heart as phantom heart. Pray he is alive. I've returned in rain to find him, to learn why he never wrote. I've brought cash, a currency of paisleys, to buy the new stamps. Rare already, blank, no nation named on them. Without a lamp, I look for him in houses buried, empty. He may be alive, opening doors of smoke, breathing in the dark. His ash refrain. So the person is looking for the muezzin who used to climb up and down the minarets. So he has returned in the rain, and he wants to know why he never wrote to him. The poet says that I have brought cash and a currency of paisleys to buy new stamps. Now, paisley is a stamp which is commonly found in Kashmir. Paisley is a design that's usually seen in Kashmiri shawls and all. So he says about paisleys that he has brought currency of paisleys, he has brought cash, but then the stamps are already rare and it is blank. No nation is written. Only if something is written on a post, it can be delivered. When nothing is written, how can it be delivered? And the poet says that without a lamp, I look for him in houses buried, empty. He may be alive. So he's just hoping that the museum is alive and he opens doors of smoke and he might be breathing in the dark. Everything is finished, nothing remains. I must force silence to be a mirror, to see his voice again for directions. Fire runs in waves. Should I cross that river? Each post office is boarded up. Who will deliver parchment cut in paisleys, my news to prisons? Only silence can now trace my letters to him, or in a dead office the dark pains. The poet is even more confused, and he is sorrowful, and he says that everything is finished, nothing remains, and he must force silence to be the voice again. Silence should voice him for directions, it seems. How sad. Fire runs in waves. Should I cross that river? So he's thinking, there is a river, there is supposedly a river which is full of fire, and he is imagining how he is going to cross that fire. And each post office is boarded up. Each post office is boarding up with letters, because you must remember that era when there was no landline phone, there was no mobile phone, there was no internet, so communication was possible only through postal cards. Who will deliver parchments cut in paisleys, my news to prisons? Now he calls Kashmir as prison because every communication is cut off. The land is isolated. There is no communication. Nobody knows what's happening there. There is no information coming in or out of Kashmir. So who will deliver parchment cut in paisley? Paisley, I told you, that's a special stamp especially found in Kashmir. Who will deliver it to them? The poet is just worried, and he is very sad, and he is pathetic. That is why he is writing these lines. Only silence can now trace my letters to him. Only silence can trace poet's letters to his friend, or his letters to the museum, or in a dead office the dark pains. In the dead dark post office, only the dark pains can answer to his queries, that why people are not writing to him, or why he is not receiving messages, who will deliver these letters. The letters keep on piling in the post office. That is the idea conveyed here. The second stanza, the second section to be precise, refers to any of the numerous battles in Kashmir. The conflict in 1990s involved Muslim militants rousing more than 100 Hindu Pandits from Kashmir Valley, which is also known as Paradise, or Paradise on Earth. Kashmir is known as Paradise on Earth for its beauty, in an effort to secure control of the valley and state. The us and them the speaker refers to in the fifth line are Hindus and Muslims, the two dominant groups of the region. The soldiers are Indian, many of whom buried homes and entire villages during the unrest. The call of the muezzin is the call to prayer, which is performed at dawn, noon, afternoon, sunset, and night. With no muezzin, there is no prayer in the city. However, the speaker maintains we are faithful. Okay. In the second section, images are repeated but used in different contexts. The fire and the dark of the first section are now words on a card found in the street, appropriate for a poem about a country that has ceased postal delivery. The speaker offers his own hand to cancel stamps and opens the lines for communication. The second stanza introduces a character the speaker obviously wants to communicate with but cannot. There is no nation named on stamps because Kashmir is a disputed territory fought over by India and Pakistan and is not independent. The speaker looks for this person through the smolder and ruins of burned houses. In the last stanza, the speaker uses silence and fires as symbolic images that may give him a clue to the direction he should take. Moving on to the third section of the poem. The entire map of the lost will be candled. I am the keeper of the minaret since the muezzin died. Come soon, I am alive. There's almost a paisley against the light, sometimes white, then black. The glutinous wash is wet on its back as it blossoms into autumn's final country. By it, I issue it only once at night. Come, before I am killed, my voice cancelled. So here, the poet presents a different form of communication. Now he says that the muezzin is dead, and he is alive in the minaret. He wants people to come and buy stamps. He wants the communication to be awakened once again. He says the entire map of the lost will be candled. The entire map of the country will be candled again. Once again, the roots can be enlivened. I am the keeper of the minaret since the muezzin died. So it's the poet who is there in the minaret. Come soon, I am alive. And he says he is alive, and there is paisley against light, sometimes white and then black. He says there is paisley remaining, so please come collect it, write letters, and let them be given. The glutinous wash is wet on its back, and it blossoms into autumn's final country. So he describes the region, it's the autumn's time, and the wash is still fresh. So please come and collect these paisleys, he says. Buy it, I issue it only once at night. Now, as we know, even the muezzin was keeping a lamp, and also he was soaking the wicks in mustard oil so that he can work at night. Similarly, the poet says that he issues the stamps only once, that also at night time. Come before I am killed, my voice cancelled. So the poet wants the people to come before he himself is killed. In this dark rain, be faithful, phantom heart. This is your pain. Feel it. You must feel it. Nothing will remain. Everything is finished. I see his voice again. This is a shrine of words. You will find your letters to me and mine to you. Come soon and tear open these vanished envelopes and reach the minaret. I am inside the fire. I found the dark. This is your pain. You must feel it. Feel it, heart. Be faithful to this mad refrain. For he soaked the wicks of clay lamps, lit them each night as he climbed these steps to read messages scratched on planet. His hands were seals to cancel the stamps. This is an archive. I have found the remains of his voice, the map of longing with no limit. So here the poet is has entered the frantic state of mind. Okay, he is so much saddened by the loss that he is trying to lose his reason, and he says he is addressing himself, his phantom heart. He says, "This is your pain. The entire country is suffering. The Kashmir is suffering. This is your pain, and you must feel it." He is very pessimistic, and he says, "Nothing will remain. Everything is finished." And later on, he imagines that he has seen his voice again. He has met the uh, muezzin again. And he says, now these lines are very important. This is shrine of words. Now here, please remember, he is not speaking about the minaret, or he is not speaking about the post office filled with posts, but he is speaking about this poem. This poem is a shrine of words. You will find letters to me and mine to you. Come soon and tear open these vanished envelopes. So here he is trying to, in the particular poem, he is trying to eternalize the letters to him, and those letters he has written for others. Okay, and he wants people to come and tear open the envelopes and reach the minaret. I'm inside the fire. I have found the dark. He says, I'm inside the war region. I have found the dark. But then he has found a little place of comfort. This is your pain. You must feel it. Feel it, heart. Be faithful to this mad refrain. He wants his heart to remember that it is this heart's pain, and the heart must feel it. And he says that he has met the muezzin who used to soak the wicks of clay lamps, and each night he used to climb the minarets to read those letters or try to cancel stamps of letters sent and letters returned for some people. His hands were seals to cancel the stamps. This is an archive. I have found the remains of his voice, the map of longings with no limit. And in that minaret, or in that region, what does he find? He finds the map of longings with no limit. So in this section, the poet takes on the role of muezzin, exhorting people to come to him and buy stamps before he dies. The glutinous wash refers to the back of the stamps. In the second stanza, the speaker addresses his own heart. He is having discourse with different sides of himself. The fire he is inside is the fire of being, the various identities that Shahid Ali has cultivated as an inborn Kashmiri. Agha Shahid Ali was torn apart by fightings between Muslims and Hindus in Kashmir, empathizing with both sides. In the last stanza, the speaker has found his own voice by discovering the remains of the voice of others, especially the muezzin who died. Moving to the very last section of the poem, the fourth section. I read them, letters of lovers, the mad ones, and mine to him from whom no answers come. I light lamps, send my answers, calls to prayer to deaf worlds across continents. And my lament is cries countless, cries like dead letters sent to this world, whose end was near, always near. My words go out in huge packages of rain, go there to address us across the oceans. Here, the poet has taken or assumed the role of the muezzin and he is reading the letters. He reads the letters of lovers, he reads the letters of mad ones, he reads and he thinks about the people who have not communicated to him. He says, I light lamps, send my answers, calls to prayers, and he tries to seek help from very deaf worlds across the continent. Here he refers to the Kashmir's issue. Kashmir is in trouble. Kashmir has been fighting for a long time, but then no other country is willing to help them. No other country or region is ready to interfere in this matter. That is why he says he is calling to prayer to deaf worlds across the continents. And my lament is cries countless. And his lament is like cries. His lament is like dead letters sent to this world because letters are sent there and it gets struck. Okay, the communication is not passed, the message is not passed, so that is the end, dead end. And he says his words go out in huge packages of rain, go there to address us across the oceans. He says through this poem his lament, his cries, his pain might reach other people. It is raining as I write this. I have no prayer. It is a shout held in. It is us, whose letters are cries that break like bodies in prison. Now each night in the minaret, I guide myself up the steps, mad Silor. I throw paisleys to clouds. The lost are like this. They bribe the air for dawn. This their dark purpose. But there is no sun here. There is no sun here. Now he says it was raining when he is writing this letter or this poem, and he has no prayer. It is just a shout. It is us. It is us. Please find us. And those letters are crying. It is us. And letters are crying to just like bodies who wants to break the prison, or bodies or the people when they are in prison they somehow want to break free. Just like that, those letters are crying. It is us. It is us. Okay. And he says each night in the minaret he guides himself up the stairs just like the muezzin used to do. And he is throwing the paisleys to clouds. He is just throwing the stamps away because nobody comes to buy. And he says that just like the stamps scattered in the air, just like that, the lost people are like that. The lost people have nowhere to go, nowhere to seek help. They just cry, they just pray for help, and they are lost. They bribe the air for dawn. Their dark purpose. He says that the people try to bribe even the air. The lost they cannot do anything else. But then that serves no purpose. It is so dark and there is no sun here. Then be pitiless, you whom I could not save. Send your cries to me, if only in this way. I have found a prisoner's letter to a lover. One begins, these words may never reach you. Another ends, the skin dissolves in dew without your touch. And I want to answer, I want to live forever. What else can I say? It rains as I write this. Mad heart, be brave. Here, in this stanza, the poet concludes this poem and he says that to people whom he could not save or to people whom he could not answer, be pitiless. And then he remembers yet another instance of a prisoner's letter to a lover. And it begins as if these words might not reach you. But then, in spite of this feeling, the prisoner writes his letter to his lover. And there is yet another letter which ends that this skin dissolves in dew without your touch. That is, The body is vanishing. The body is disappearing without you near me. Okay, and the poet wants to answer for all these letters, and he says, I want to live forever. See, the poet's mind, due to the trauma, due to the pain, it has succumbed to madness, and he wants to live forever. He's asking, what else can I say? And again, he is reminding the readers that it is raining while he is writing this. And his last word of advice is, mad heart, be brave. Be brave to face all these situations, to feel the pain, and if possible, come out of the pain. In this final section, the speaker reads letters that have piled up and the communication of lovers. In his role as a musician, he likens his cries to dead letters sent to this world whose end was near. In the second stanza, it is a shift from we to us, signaling the recognition that those sending the letters and those receiving the letters are the same person. The speaker has now descended into a realm of madness, of undifferentiated identity. He is lost, seeing only his mad silhouette. In the final stanza, he uses the letters of prisoners to figuratively comment on his own desperation and situation. The poem takes a more obvious personal turn in the last few lines when the speaker admits, I want to live forever, suggesting that his own death is imminent. Now coming to the theme, a theme of this poem is exile, yearning, and loss of home and country. Coming to the first theme, exile, the 20th century was a century of wars. We have seen First World War and Second World War. When old countries dissolved and new ones sprang up, as a result, cultural and national identity were often in flux. The image of exile permeates through the 12th century poetry, and it is a motif in Ali's poems. To be lost is to be in exile, not only from one's own country, but from oneself as well. Ali's speaker is both lost to himself and lost to his land. However, he seems to have found himself, at least temporarily, in the third section when he says, the entire map of the lost will be candled, suggesting that self knowledge will be possible for a short time as he issues stamps at night. In the penultimate stanza of the last section, the speaker is finally understands that he has no prayer that can save him and shouts, it is us, it is us. This shout illustrates the fact that speaker has accepted the contradictions of his own heart, which are also the contradictions of his country, which, like the speaker, has no name. So, this is the theme of exile. He is exiled not only from his country but from himself. He has lost his identity. Communication. Communication is very important factor for human beings. It is more than exchanging words. For Ali, it is an act of emotional understanding of the other and of self knowledge as well. By using letters, stamps, and post office as central symbolic images in this poem, Ali underscores both the need for communication and the impossibility of communication because post offices were shut for 7 months. Not only it is literally impossible to communicate in a country without post office, but also it is difficult for warring factions of Kashmir to communicate with each other, blinded as they are by their own passions and self-righteousness. The speaker's identity and desires are comprised of different elements, just as his own homeland of Kashmir is. The more he can understand himself, the more he can understand the turmoil that is ravaging his country. The speaker moves from returning to the country at the beginning of the poem to acknowledging that he cannot save himself or, by extension, his country at the end of the poem. Like Kashmir, the speaker's heart is damaged, but also like Kashmir, it continues fueled by its own courage and need to go on. So here in the poem, as the title suggests, it is about post office. So we must remember that the main motive here is communication. Post-colonialism. Postcolonialism refers to the ways in which race, ethnicity, culture, and human identity are represented in the modern era after many colonized countries gained their independence. Ali and his poetry are such cultural products. Okay, Ali was born in 1949, 2 years after Indian independence in New Delhi, and raised in Kashmir, a territory claimed by both India and Pakistan. His family was Shia, a minority among the Muslims of Kashmir. In addition, he spent his mid-teens in Indiana before returning to India. The sheer fact of how so much moving and so much cultural application plays into the composition of Ali's poem, especially The Country Without a Post Office. Here, the speaker is fraught with contradictions and competing desires so much that he seems to long for annihilation. Everything is finished, nothing remains, the poet says at one point, and I want to live forever at another point. The change in poet's role from observer of the minaret to the keeper marks Ali's attempt through his poetry to inhibit the contradictions rather than to keep them at bay. In doing so, he risks his own sanity. Here, the poem can be analyzed in postcolonial theory as well. Now, coming to the next concept, address. So when we are writing a letter, you should write from address and to address. So there should be some address. If address is lost, what can be done? Who is the he the speaker returns to find? There is no definitive answer. The person the speaker seeks can be a lover or beloved or a part of himself with whom he is trying to make contact. The latter point makes sense when one considers the third section in which the speaker addresses his own heart a number of times, encouraging it to feel the pain. The assumption must be that the speaker has had a difficult time feeling before he returned. And it is also mentioned that in the poem, Ali mentions about so many letters written from lovers, letters written from prison, okay, and in those things he is telling that it is a doomed land. There is no addresses because houses are buried because of entombment and all. The entire space is dislocated. There is no address to which these letters can be sent. That is why the letters keep on piling. Okay, therefore address is an important theme in this poem. Coming to imagery, okay, Ali has used concrete imagery that appeals to the senses. Shahid Ali uses concrete images that are also symbolic and universal to evoke ideas and emotions familiar to the readers. Some of the images are of fire, signifying purification and ruin. Okay, fire. He says that the fire caves in, and he wants to go to darkness. He wants to find darkness to find comfort over there. And there is a mention of lamp. When he speaks about muezzin, he says a muezzin who soaks the wicks in mustard oil and he lights the lamp every night. So there is lamp signifying insight and light, and heart signifying passion and emotional turmoil. Taken as a whole, Ali's imagery suggests powerful yet conflicting emotions which underline his speaker's state of mind. So that is it for now, friends. Thank you so much. If you like this session, please share it with your friends. Thank you so much.